Building on the 1.5 element of the Paris Agreement, the scientific community was asked to look at that, and it published its 1.5 report in 2018, and it demonstrated the huge impacts at 1.5. Though they are bad, they are not as bad as those at 2. So these small temperature differences make a huge difference in terms of the impacts that we're going to face. And this eventually sort of led into the G7 communique in May of this year, very importantly saying that actually, thanks to the science, we understand the impacts, and we need to focus much more on not going above 1.5 degrees centigrade rather than 2 degrees centigrade. And the CE bill actually embeds that newer framing. If you look at the set of reports, what's absolutely clear from a mitigation point of view, it's the total carbon budget, not long-term targets that link with temperature rise. That's what really matters. That's the CO2 and other greenhouse gases that we dump in the atmosphere. So if you take the latest figures from the IPCC and you adjust that to January 2022, then for a good chance of staying below 1.5 degrees centigrade, we can emit globally about 320 billion tons of CO2. Now, that may not mean much to most of you, but we currently emit about 40 billion tons. That's 8 years of current global emissions before we blow the budget for 1.5 degrees centigrade. So play that out on a little plot and assume we're going to start doing something straight away. So from 2022, and then stylistically, that's the line you have. Now, imagine us doing this globally. That's zero emissions of CO2 by 2038. And in Paris, we committed to, and in every other UN negotiation, to reduce our emissions on the basis of equity between countries, particularly the poor and the wealthy. So you go back to this sort of global carbon pie that we have, 320 billion tons of CO2 if we're genuinely committed to our 1.5 degrees C rise. And we ask the question, how much did the UK get? Now, the UK would have somewhere between 1 to 1.5 billion tons of CO2 that it can emit. And if you include aviation and shipping at the moment, from a territorial perspective, it's emitting around about 400 million tons. So about 2.5 to 4 years of current emissions for the UK. Our consumption emissions, of course, are considerably higher than that. If we are serious about our commitments, and I take it when we sign these things, we mean it honestly, then to give a flavor of what 1.5 mitigation looks like, that's over 15% per annum, 15% every single year mitigation. We managed 10% in 2020 due to COVID. That's a total reduction of about 80% by 2030 compared with 2019.